So this is a tough question, but I have to ask. I hear you giving us all the explanations.
Yes.
You're giving us the legal definitions as to what's happening, what this means and what that means, and who's still doing what. However, I have to ask, why did this happen? I think as a society, we're still all just dumbfounded as to what's going on, and it feels like something else happened behind doors.
I know, and that's the question everyone wants to know is what's really going on here?
Yeah.
How did this occur? Is this a deal? Is this Chicago politics? I mean, up and down my timeline, I've seen those same questions. And the truth of the matter is because of the way in which this happened, we may never know.
Oh, my goodness.
I know.
Oh, that's
it's
so
like
frustrating.
I know, it's like a movie cliffhanger. We may never
it's
know.
Like the charges just went through our hands like quicksand. They're not there anymore.
Yeah. But
what?
One thing that, and Patricia Holmes is actually a former judge. So one thing that former Judge Holmes said was, this is exactly why we don't try cases in the media. And in this instance, it was almost perceived as if he was guilty before he had any chance. He had his day in court.
Yeah.
And so even now, the police chief and the mayor are pretty adamant that he's guilty of this. But I want to be really clear, all charges are dropped. In terms of criminal liability, it was determined that he no longer warranted to have these charges.
What about the federal investigation that's happening with the letter probe and all of that? How is that going to be impacted, do you think?
Yeah, so the impact of it is unknown at this point, but this does not mean that the federal investigation won't move forward. They operate on their own time clock and have their own process, and they're actually outside of the state's jurisdiction. So the federal process, as far as we know, is still continuing on.
What about the brothers that Jussie said allegedly attacked him? Like, what's going to happen with them now?
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that if this were all Jussie's hoax, but now we found that they're dropping those charges, then why wouldn't those brothers actually be charged, which was the question I had. But what we saw in the press conference was that his attorney, Patricia Holmes, actually stated that they didn't want to try that in the press. They didn't give us a direct answer as to whether they're going to go after them civilly. But what we know is the police still believe Jussie did it. They still believe this is a hoax, and that was very clear based on the superintendent's statements. So they're not going to give the prosecutors any particular evidence against those brothers, at least what we know, as from what we know right now.
Before I ask you the documents, why wouldn't Jussie, why wouldn't he sue the CPD if these charges are dropped and all that he's gone through,
for slander
and if he's innocent,
libel.
I would double down and say, hey, look, you wanted to bring all this heat on me, now it's dropped, I'm coming at you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that makes perfect sense. And in fact, he was asked that question and declined to answer. There was no comment on that. So we may see the saga continue on that front.